Welcome, friends and listeners. Welcome, Spren and Inquisitors. I'm Jake.
And I'm Jax. We are your Cosmere commentators. Join us this week as we dive into the copper mines.
Welcome back. For those of you who this is your first time seeing or listening to us, just do a quick introduction. I'm Jake. This is Jax. We are doing a podcast centered around Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, specifically deep diving it.
Deep diving the Cosmere. Every book, every chapter, every page.
Every line, every word.
Maybe not every word. There's
sometimes every syllable, okay?
No, but we really do. We want to get in and we want to go through the entire Cosmere and really get into Brandon Sanderson's world building and all of the connections that he's created throughout his universe.
Yeah. So in today's episode, it's going to be a little different than what we're usually doing. We are going to be setting a base knowledge for all of our listeners about the Cosmere, because every time we bring up a theory, there's phrases and concepts that we're going to just brush over and not explain every single time.
Right.
So this episode is for you guys to really know the building blocks of the Cosmere so that it saves us time in the future whenever it comes up.
Yes. We know that there's a lot of people who have read through the Cosmere but haven't dived super deep into it. There might be terms in books that you've come across that you don't know what they mean because you came across them and Brandon just assumed that you knew.
Like realmatic theory. How many of you guys right now could explain realmatic theory to us? Probably not a lot. So that's
some of you for sure.
Yeah. But that's what we're going to be doing in this episode, is just laying the land out and, plowing forward.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, Future Jacob here. Just a quick spoiler warning for you. In this episode, we do light spoilers for Tress of the Emerald Sea, Sunlit Man, White Sand, Mistborn Secret History, Warbreakers, and we do pretty heavy spoilers for both Mistborn eras and the Stormlight Archive. If you haven't finished the Cosmere yet, we recommend skipping this episode entirely to avoid spoilers. Thanks.
So to begin, Jacob, what is the Cosmere?
So we're going to talk about the Cosmere in real life before we talk about it on screen. By the way, anytime we say on screen, just means like in the canon books is what we're talking about. So the Cosmere is basically a set of books. This set of books, audio listeners, we're pointing to all the Cosmere books that we have on our table. Now, not all of these books are, most of them are not the same story. They happen on their own worlds, but they are all in the same universe.
Yep.
So we start with Brandon producing the very first book, which was Elantris, in 2005, April 21st, 2005.
That's when it all began.
He actually had tried to publish, I think it was 6 books before this, before he got the first one, and he got it published by Tor Books in 2005. And then moving on, he, then published the very famous Mistborn, the first book in the Mistborn series, The Final Empire, in 2006. Great book, by the way. And overall, there's 32 published works in the Cosmere. So that includes graphic novels, short stories, novellas, books, all of them. There's 32 published works.
Okay. So does that break the Arcanum Unbounded into separate short stories?
It breaks up the Arcanum Unbounded, and it also includes the Arcanum Unbounded as its own work.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe 31.
Maybe 31. If you break the Arcanum Unbounded into its separate short stories and don't count the Arcanum Unbounded, maybe 31 published works.
So that is what the Cosmere is in real life. Jax, what is the Cosmere on screen?
Oh, well, like Jake said, it's a universe. So basically what happened is each of these individual series, so you've got your Stormlight Archives here. You've got the Mistborn trilogy and then the follow-up Mistborn series. You have some standalones as well. So we've got Tress of the Emerald Sea here. We've got the Sunlit Man, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And then you've just got some more short stories over there. Some of them that go with the Stormlight Archives. Obviously, you've got Elantris here. Each of those individual books or series takes place on its own world. Obviously, like the Mistborn trilogy and then the follow-up Mistborn series take place on the same world, just years apart.
Right.
But each of those worlds resides in this same universe.
Yeah, and that universe, widely to be thought of not technically canon, was created by a being called Adonalsium.
Yes.
So Adonalsium, whose exact nature is actually unclear so far. We're hoping to get more on that once Dragonsteel actually drops canon.
In short, Adonalsium was a god.
Yes.
Or god.
Not to get too deep into it, but it is believed that it was all the investiture in the universe gaining consciousness like we see on screen in, some of the stories.
Right. We're going to have to explain investiture there, so we will get to that.
We will get to that, I promise. We're getting ahead of ourselves. But this being used the 4 Dawn Shards to create the Cosmere, or the 4 primal commands. Jax, if you want to go more into what a Dawn Shard is.
Again, it's there's some of it that's unclear. There's some of it that's still in the workings. Basically, what Jake has said is, what we know. There's these 4 primal commands, and we call them Dawn Shards, and they just have different. I don't know if I want to say intent.
I think intent is a pretty good word. I mean, we know that using the Dawn Shards, you need intent to use the command.
Right. So basically, there are these 4 primal commands that Adonalsium used together to create the universe, basically. And throughout a lot of these books and series, you'll see remnants of Adonalsium's work. A lot of the investiture, we'll get to what investiture is, but a lot of the investiture we see is from individual shards, but we do see some investiture that is left over from Adonalsium and that isn't attributed to any specific shard.
Yeah. So Adonalsium created the universe that we know as the Cosmere. He also created some planets, like the famous Roshar from the Stormlight Archives. He created that before the Shattering. And he also created Yolen, which we don't know too much about it. Again, that one's going to come out with Dragonsteel. But it was basically a planet with humans, dragons, and what are called Shodel. Those are kind of the 3 races that were on there. And Adonalsium was kind of their god. But we know eventually the people decided to kill their god.
Yeah.
Which is known as the Shattering.
Yes. So a group of 16 people got together.
So actually, the size of the group is unknown.
Okay.
Because we know 16 people picked up shards, but
that's fair.
You have Wit or Hoyd in that group, so there was at least 17 people.
Yeah. You found something that said the group of the size of the group is unknown.
Well, it's just they don't specify the size of the group. They just specify that 16 of them went on to pick up the shards.
Okay. Because I know there was a planned amount of them that were going to pick up the shards because Wit was supposed to pick up a shard. So I know that they had at least discussed prior, probably.
I don't know about how prior, because I don't think they could have known
that he would shatter
into 16 pieces.
That's fair.
There was, if they were, I think they were just planning to kill him.
Okay.
And then he shattered into 16 pieces, and then they probably got together and was like, "Hey, like,
now what?
We need to, do we pick up this power? Blah 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 blah."
But what we do know is that they used those same Dawn Shards, those same 4 primal commands to kill Adonalsium.
Yes. So they created a weapon that utilized the Dawn Shards, killed Adonalsium, or shattered him, and he shattered into 16 pieces, which we call shards. Then 16 people in the group went and took up these shards and capital A ascended to godhood, basically.
Yes.
Now, each of the shards, they actually agreed to not go to the same worlds.
Right.
They agreed to spread out in the Cosmere, go to their own worlds, do their own thing.
Create worlds.
Yeah, there are worlds that were created. I'm pretty sure Scadrial,
Yep.
the world in Mistborn, was created post-shattering. So they went out to do their own things, but we also know that a good amount of them
didn't
follow that rule, and that's where we find devotion and dominion on Cell and ruin and preservation on Scadrial, and
cultivation, honor, and eventually
odium on Roshar. So let's actually go through. So we have devotion, dominion, preservation, ruin, odium, cultivation, honor, endowment.
So pause right there before endowment. Those 7 right there are our biggest on-screen ones so far. The most that we know about, or the ones that we have the most information about.
Yeah. Shout out to autonomy kind of being
behind the scenes
in that group.
Yes.
We do see the works of autonomy quite a bit, especially in the Mistborn series.
Absolutely.
So
after those 7, continue.
Endowment, autonomy, invention, mercy, valor, whimsy, virtuosity, and reason.
There's some of these that we have no idea where they are.
No information
what
on
they're
them.
doing.
Even their Coppermind page is like 2 sentences.
Yeah. There's no power system that we have discovered that's associated with them. So Brandon still has a lot more questions to answer for sure.
Yeah, so those 16 are kind of going to be the gods of each world. When we hop into Elantris, we will talk about Dominion and Devotion quite a bit, because those are the shards of that world. Okay, that kind of covers the basis of what the Cosmere is and Adonalsium and the shards. We're going to talk about world hoppers, because that's kind of, in my opinion, some of the funnest parts of these books.
Yes, world hoppers are one of our favorite things to see on screen. A lot of times they're a little more discreet. You have to really be paying attention if you're going to catch all the world hoppers. Sometimes they're fairly blatant.
Yes.
Shout out to our favorite world hopper, Hoyd.
I'm sure it's everyone's favorite world hopper. So in the Cosmere, there are groups of people that are aware of the wider Cosmere. They're aware of basically everything we've just told you about the other worlds, about the other shards, all of that.
Right. And I think it's important to note there that there are people who are not.
Yeah. The majority of people in these books are only aware of their world.
Right.
And sometimes they're not even aware of the shard that is the god of that world.
Right. They might worship God. They might, pray to a god, but they don't actually know, what their actual god is or where he comes from.
Yeah. So these are just basically people. World hoppers are just people that can hop from world to world. And out of all of the world hoppers, the one we see most, we already mentioned him. We called him Hoyd, but he goes by lots of names.
Hoyd,
I think
Wit, Saphandrius.
I think Saphandrius is supposed to be his name that he's most widely known by.
Yeah, I think I don't think it was his birth name. I don't think Saphandrius was his first name. But at the point of the shattering, I think Saphandrius was his name. So he was involved in the shattering of Adonalsium. Mm-hmm. And so all of the shards are aware of Hoyd, Wit, but they know him as Saphandrius.
And some were even pretty good friends with him.
Yeah.
As we'll see later in the books, as we go through them, we'll point everything out. But he basically goes by a different name every time we see him.
Pretty much.
So, like, in the Stormlight Archive, he's widely known as the King's Wit. So people call him Wit. In Warbreaker, he goes by Midius or Midius. Midius.
Hey guys, future Jacob here. I'm going to be stopping in anytime we get something incorrect on the pod. In this deep dive podcast, we want you guys to get all the correct information. I actually say that in the story of Warbreaker, Hoyd goes by the name Midius. This is incorrect. In Warbreaker, Hoyd goes by the name Hoyd.
So we will definitely be pointing him out every single time we run into him.
Yes. Now, Jacob said he's most widely known as Cephandrius, and that's true for, everybody who's cosmically aware. His most widely known name is Cephandrius, but the name you'll see him use most on screen is Hoyd.
Yeah, and I think that's the name. Wit and Hoyd is the name that most in real life, when we refer to him, we will probably use Hoyd.
Hoyd or Wit.
Wit if we're in Roshar.
Yeah.
But it's mostly Hoyd, I think, is his most widely known name outside.
Yeah, we're not going to be calling him Cephandrius.
No. Yeah, so as for simplicity, we're just going to refer to him as Hoyd for the most part. So he was part of the original group that attacked Adonalsium and shattered him, and he was actually offered the shard, or one of the shards, and he refused.
Do you know which one?
No.
Okay, keep talking.
And we're going to get flamed for it.
We're going to get flamed for that. We should know which, because I know I've read it before.
Yeah.
Which shard Hoyd was going to pick up.
So he actually refused the shard, and we know he has his own agenda, but we just don't know what. But we're pretty sure that he wants generally what's best for the Cosmere as a whole.
Yes.
We think.
Hoyd's intentions aren't always clear.
Mm-hmm.
We know he's going around. Did you mention that he was picking up different magic systems? So he's going around to each of these worlds and he's picking up different magic systems. He obviously on Roshar we have Knights Radiant, and we know by this point in the Cosmere that Hoyd has become a Knight Radiant. He's a Light Weaver. We know he's been to Scadrial and picked up a bead of Lerasium and become a Mistborn. We know through Tress of the Emerald Sea that Hoyd tricked Rhaina into inviting him to be an Elantrian. So we know that Hoyd has been going around. We also, I believe, see Hoyd awaken using breath.
I think so.
And we've obviously seen Hoyd on Nalthis, so we know he's been there. The amount of breath he might have is unclear, but we know that he's going through and acquiring all of these magical powers.
Now, why he's doing this, we don't know. There's a lot about Hoyd we don't know, but something we do know about Hoyd is that he became a Dawn Shard at one point. Now, the wording of that might be a little confusing.
Right.
Some people say that he held a Dawn Shard, but through the Coppermind and through Words of Brandon, it is more correct to say that he became a Dawn Shard for an undisclosed amount of time.
Yes, by holding that primal command, one becomes a Dawn Shard.
Yes, and this gives him certain powers, but it also brings him certain limitations.
Yes.
And we'll probably get more into that as it comes up.
Yeah, we'll see. Hoyd calls it his
boon, or no?
No, it's
and for my boon.
No, we see it in Sunlit Man. It's some sort of limitation. I can't remember the exact term they use for it right now, but it's a limitation that people who have held that specific Dawn Shard or have been that specific Dawn Shard, to use the correct terminology here, have this certain restriction on them. So we'll get into that.
Yeah. Okay. So we also want to bring up another important world hopper, Chris, or
Duchess Chrysala.
Duchess Chrysala. She is from
Taldane.
Taldane, which is the world for the White Sand graphic novels.
Yes. And just so everybody knows, my biggest role in this podcast is going to be correcting Jake here when he gets names wrong.
Because I will. And
Because he will.
more likely, I will just pause and look at you, like waiting for you to give me a name because I can't remember it.
Yeah. I for some reason the names just stick in my head, and Jacob will read a paragraph from a book and look up to talk about what he just read and just completely forget the name that he just read.
I will forget like the main character names.
Yeah.
Like I called Serene Shalon the other day.
And he called Raoden Kaladin. So
This is true.
So just so you guys know, when I am correcting Jacob, I'm not being mean. I just want to make sure that you, the viewer, know who we're talking
He's
about.
actually being really nice to me because I would look so dumb doing this podcast alone because I wouldn't be able to remember any names. That being said,
Duchess Chrysala.
Duchess Chrysala. At the end of each book, if you've read through the Cosmere, you know that we have something called the Ars Arcanum. And it's basically just like really good information about whatever world we were just reading about. And all the Ars Arcanum are written by Duchess Chrysala. We're going to call her Chris from now on.
Yep. That's what she goes by in the Cosmere.
Yes.
But yeah, all of those Ars Arcanum are Chris hopping world to world and studying the magic system, studying the investiture on that world, how the magic system works, what its limitations are, what people can do with it. And so Chris is also aware of Hoyd. We see in the Mistborn Secret History that Kelsier talks to Chris and lets her know, yeah, Hoyd just came through here. And that upsets Chris for reasons unknown.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly what Chris's and Hoyd's relationship is, but we do know that she's aware of Hoyd, but she is going to all of these worlds and documenting and researching all of these power systems.
Yeah. And we'll get more into her backstory and, you know, where she's staying and all that as it comes up in the Cosmere.
Absolutely.
Okay. That being said, we are going to do our very first segment of the new podcast.
Here we go.
What did he say? What did he say segment, where each week we are going to be swipping. We are going to be swapping off finding words of Brandon, and one of us is going to ask the question, and the other one is going to kind of guess how Brandon would have answered it.
Yeah, what the answer to that question was, what Brandon said about it, and then we'll give the real answer as well, and maybe chat a little bit about the implications of that.
And if the questioner thinks that the answerer did a good enough job, they will get a point, and we are going to be tallying those points through the whole podcast.
Okay.
So hopefully
that's news to me.
Hopefully we can keep it competitive.
Okay, I feel like I should have come prepared with a better question than I gave you an easy one for this first episode.
The sad part is I'm probably going to blank and not be able to answer it anyways, so bear with me.
I'll have to find some questions that center around people's names going forward.
No, please. Please.
Okay, so this question was given at a Words of Radiant signing in Washington, D.C., in March of 2014. So it's kind of an older one, but the questioner is referring to the epigraph of chapter 11, The Way of Kings, where it says, 3 of 16 ruled, and now the broken one reigns. Did Odium follow 3 other shards to Roshar, or is he the third shard?
How Brandon would have answered that.
How did Brandon answer this in 2014?
And I'm going to make the assumption that you didn't just give me a Raffo.
No, I feel like we should stay away from Raffos. I didn't give you a Raffo.
By the way, Raffo is Brandon's word for read and find out.
Yeah.
So if he's ever asked a question that he's probably going to use the answer in a future work, he'll Raffo it so that he doesn't spoil whatever he's going to use it for.
Correct.
So not a Raffo.
Not a Raffo.
And I'm also going to make the assumption that you didn't give me one of his super vague answers where he goes, maybe, who knows? Am I okay in that assumption?
You're okay in that assumption.
Okay. I'm going to say that Odium is the third.
The third.
Shard or whatever.
Yep.
Yes. That
You
he
already
is.
answered it. I almost wanted you. You're pretty close to getting it verbatim. Brandon Sanderson said Odium is the third shard on Roshar.
Cool.
So that's 1 point for Jacob.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other shard that it really could be.
No, we know that honor and cultivation went to Roshar together.
Mhm.
We're building the world together. We're
Lovers.
Lovers
honor
lovers
and
in the
cultivation, yes, were indeed lovers. So,
nighttime. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. Honor and maybe we'll edit this out because I might be wrong and I don't want to sound like an idiot, but honor and cultivation weren't even the same race, were they?
no. Cultivation is a
Was she a
dragon.
a dragon?
I'm pretty sure.
That's what I thought.
And honor is a human.
Yeah. But
But
when
we know
Brandon
that
Sanderson says dragon, we're kind of making the assumption that he's talking about the typical fantasy dragon. We
well,
also know that they have human avatars.
yes. So like a dragon and a human falling in love isn't something that's so crazy because they can take human form.
Yeah.
So, and I believe we get confirmation that it is like the typical fantasy dragon in Tress.
We do see, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the images in Tress are canonized, and the image in Tress of the Emerald Sea is a full dragon.
Okay,
It's a fantasy style dragon. So I assume that's confirmation enough.
So, honor and cultivation didn't create Roshar. It was already created by Aiden Alcium.
Correct.
But they settled on Roshar together, and then eventually Odium came to Roshar
With the humans.
with the humans and got trapped there.
Yes.
So, yes,
Good answer.
Odium is the third shard. I can't even think of who else,
No, I don't think
third.
there's anybody else that has
unless
touched
they
Roshar.
were interpreting the three as something other than shards.
Yeah.
Which I don't think they were.
They weren't. They were asking, were there 3 shards? And there are shards that we know nothing about.
Yeah.
So it could have been
Yeah.
a question of, is there a hidden shard on Roshar that
Yeah.
we know nothing about?
Because this was, you said it was a Words of Radiance signing,
Yes.
which means they had only gotten the first 2 books so far.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have really known.
Yeah.
Anyways,
And that is,
that was, what did he say?
what did he say?
Okay, perfect. Moving on, we are going to talk about investiture. So investiture is basically the base of every magic system we see in the Cosmere, is basically the base of
Life.
everything
Yeah.
in the Cosmere. So whatever you want to call that for our world, I don't know.
I think the mitochondria. I think
The-
I think investiture is the powerhouse of the cell.
investiture do be the powerhouse of the cell. But yeah, we see all different kinds of uses of investiture. But just investiture by itself, building block of the Cosmere, pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything in the Cosmere has innate investiture. Obviously, some things have more than other. I'm pretty sure that anything living has a more, like a higher, I guess, concentration of innate investiture than anything inert.
Sure.
But yeah, investiture really is the building block of the entire universe.
Yeah. And we know that left alone, investiture will gain a consciousness. So
Okay.
that's kind of where the theory of Adenalcium coming from just all the investiture in the universe gaining a consciousness, and that was Adenalcium.
Okay. Where do we know that from? Do you have like a list on that, or is that just
Just like stuff that gain consciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, honor
Okay.
at the end.
Yeah, we see that in Rhythm of War. I was gonna
We
point
see that
out.
in
Sorry, not Rhythm of War. Wind and Truth.
Wind and Truth.
I was gonna point out like the Sions and Skays.
So the Sions and Skays,
Are they different?
technically no.
Okay.
They do gain the consciousness from being clumps of investiture, but it's more that they are splinters of a shard.
Okay.
So similar
Same
to
thing with
Spren,
Spren. Yeah.
they are just bigger chunks of investiture from a shard that gain
That gain
consciousness.
consciousness. But it is the same thing in that just this coalescence, that's not the right word, but this concentration of investiture just gaining consciousness.
If it's left alone for long enough,
right,
it will just gain consciousness. So yeah, each world uses investiture differently due to the relations of the world's shard. So this is when we're talking about this, we're talking about
the different power systems.
Yeah, the different powers. So Stormlight in the Stormlight archives is investiture. The metals that they use, right?
Yeah. So allomancy, feruchemy, hemalurgy are all different uses of investiture.
Aeons in Elantris are, channeling investiture and using it within their power system.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that covers investiture pretty well.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So basically, it's just the building block of the entire universe. But typically, when we're talking about investiture, we're not talking about just like innate investiture or inactive investiture. When we're talking about investiture, we'll be referencing mostly the power systems that we see investiture being used in.
Or the shard specific investiture.
Yeah.
So like Stormlight is honors investiture.
Correct.
So that's how we will be referencing investiture in the future. Now, the super fun one, the three realms.
Yes, and I did not do my research on this one, so Jacob is going to have to cover a bit more of our realmatic theory today.
So, most of the investiture that we see is in the cognitive realm. It originates in the spiritual realm. So let's just go over the three realms real quick. We have the physical realm, which is pretty much what we see on screen most of the time.
Right.
If they are in a world, walking on land, physical form, it is the physical realm. Then we have the cognitive realm, which we see as Shadesmar on Roshar.
Or the misted, I can't remember what it's called. It's the misted something.
The misty place on Scadrial is the cognitive realm.
And that one we see in the Mistborn Secret History.
Yes. And then there is the spiritual realm, which up until recently, we basically knew nothing about.
Right.
And to be honest, still kind of know.
Very little about.
So going through each of those a little deeper, obviously the physical realm is just the world around us. Not really much else we can explain there.
You're in it.
The cognitive realm is a little different. So because the cognitive realm is a realm of thought, hence the name cognitive realm, it's impacted by how people perceive it and perceive ideas in general. So this is a realm that world hoppers use quite often to hop from world to world. Because in the physical realm, these are planets in space, thousands, millions of light years apart from each other.
Right.
But in the cognitive realm, space is relative to how it's perceived.
Right.
So for a long time in the cognitive realm, these planets were basically right next to each other. You could be standing in Roshar's cognitive realm that was adjacent to Cell's cognitive realm, and you could take a step, and if you left the cognitive realm on the Cell, they're called subastrals. So if you're in the Rosharan subastral, which is Shadesmar, the cognitive realm, you move over to Cell's subastral, you would then physically, once you enter the physical realm, would be on
Cell.
So long-winded to basically say world hoppers use the cognitive realm to hop worlds.
Right.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit to go into the cognitive realm that I think we'll just save for
when we see it on screen.
when we see it on screen.
Yeah, so we'll get into the cognitive realm as we get more into the Stormlight archives, or if we go through and read the Mistborn Secret History, we'll see some screen time where characters enter the cognitive realm, and we'll talk a little bit more about it then. But for now, it is, the realm of thought, and it is how most of the world hoppers we see travel from world to world.
At least for now.
At least for now, yes. Later,
I think Tress
and Mistborn.
Tress and Sunlit Man are, and Yumi actually, I think, are all they all happen way further in the future than any of the other books.
Right.
And in that time, there will be like light speed travel through space.
Yes.
And then with the spiritual realm,
we can say that is where investiture originates and comes from. We see with Honor's Perpendicularity, when Dalinar opens Honor's Perpendicularity, that he is combining all three realms into one. And so he's basically opening this portal into the cognitive and the spiritual realm. And that is what allows him at that point to infuse spheres with Stormlight, is because he's reaching into the spiritual realm and pulling pure investiture into the physical realm.
In terms of explaining what it actually is, I think we're just going to have to do that as we're reading Wind and Truth, because it's just that complex.
Yes.
Speaking of perpendicularities, what's a perpendicularity? Well, as Jack said, it's just a junction between the three realms.
Right.
Typically, you will see them formed through concentration of a shard's investiture. So he mentioned Honor's Perpendicularity. It usually shows itself as the High Storm.
Yes.
There's no
travels across the shard. There's no fixed point. So I don't even know that the High Storm necessarily would be counted as a perpendicularity.
Well, I mean,
it recharges spheres.
It's connecting to the spiritual realm at least in some aspect, which by definition would be a perpendicularity.
Yeah. But I also know that when they talked about it and they said that, like Dalinar opened Honor's Perpendicularity, it was talked about that perpendicularity hadn't been seen in years.
Okay.
We also know that Cultivation's Perpendicularity is in the mountains with Rocks people. I can't remember the name of the race.
Unkalaki. Unkalaki.
Okay.
That's an L, not an I. Unkalaki, yes.
Yes. So the Unkalaki, they have the pools up in the peaks. Yes. And that is cultivation.
The Horn-Eater Peaks.
The Horn-Eaters.
There you
go. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. The Horn-Eater Peaks is where cultivation's perpendicularity sits. We don't know about Odium's perpendicularity. I'm wondering if it's on Braze, because I don't think we've seen it on Roshar.
I think it might be on Braze.
Hey guys, future Jacob here with a correction. Here we say that Odium's perpendicularity is on Braze. This is incorrect. It is actually on Roshar in the Shattered Plains.
Okay.
But typically, and actually interestingly, because I never really thought about this before, a lot of the perpendicularities, or at least some of them, show themselves as pools of liquid.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got the Well of Ascension, which is a perpendicularity.
We have the Horn-Eater Peaks. It's a lake. Or a pond, or I think lake.
Yeah.
This is good. And then
you got the door.
The door in Elantris is a pool, lake, pond, water.
And then
body of water.
The Eye of Pachi.
The Eye of Pachi
also, I believe, a lake.
Emerald Lake.
Okay.
Yeah. So
the ones that aren't lakes, we've got Honors, which is just like a rift is the best word I could call it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have a permanent resting place right now. I'm sure if it did, it would probably manifest as a lake.
We have the Pits of Hathsin.
Pits of Hathsin.
Which was ruins.
Yes.
We have the flower fields
The
in
Tears of Edgley.
the Tears of Edgley in
Mhm.
Warbreaker. That is
Endowment.
endowment. Okay. Yeah. So endowments perpendicularity is the flowers.
Yeah.
Field.
So the Tears, the flower field on Nalthis, the Tears of Edgley
Yeah.
is endowments.
So yeah, those are perpendicularities. It's just concentration of whatever shards on that planet's investiture, and it's typically found in places where the shard's power is like focused.
Right.
So fun thing here. This is not from the copper mine, so I can't call it canon because I couldn't find anything in the copper mine for it. But did you know that certain shards have colors associated with them?
I have heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like autonomy, I think was, I mean, her minions at least are like red and gold.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I think honor is blue.
I have wait.
Okay.
I have this was from Google AI summary.
Okay. All right.
So don't take
so
this
listeners, take this with a grain of salt.
yes. But this is what I found. I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them that had a color associated with them.
Okay.
So we're gonna see how well you do.
Oh,
How
okay.
many
All right.
out of 7 you could get.
All right. Let's hear it.
Let's throw you some.
Are you throwing me the colors or the
I'm
shard?
throwing you the shard,
Okay.
and you're gonna guess the color.
Okay.
Preservation.
Green.
So, what was that? Preservation.
White.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, my bad.
0 out of you're 0-1 though.
0-1.
Green?
I'm sorry.
Anyway, ruin.
Black.
Okay. You're 1 and 2. Honor.
Blue.
There you go. 2 and 3. Odium.
See, odium, I want to say red, but I feel like I've heard that autonomy is red. But I think I still have to say red.
I'm going to give you a half point.
Okay.
And I should have prefaced this. There are repeats.
Oh, okay.
Odium, at least according to Google AI summary, is gold or gold/red.
Okay.
Where they're pulling that from?
Because that's autonomy.
Well, just
Yeah.
calm down.
Continue.
Okay, so 2.5 out of 4. Cultivation.
Green.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can't believe you said green.
I know. I knew as soon as I said it. Okay, and you guys can flame me too.
And this one, I don't know where the heck they're pulling this one from, and I don't think you'll get it. But Dominion.
Dominion.
Actually,
Silver.
no.
Oh, okay.
But
Because so the reason I say that, and as we get into Elantris, I'll point this out. But the Elantrians, when they become Elantrian, they get a silver glow, and it talks about Elantris, the city, having a silver glow as well.
yeah, so I'm gonna stop you right there because you've swapped those two shards.
Oh, devotion.
Devotion is Aeona and deals with Aeons and the Elantrians.
Okay, you're right.
So Dominion has to do with some of the darker forms that the priests
right. The monks of Dakor
Yeah.
and the Skays.
Yeah. Those are more closely related to Dominion.
Are they doing it as red?
Yes.
Okay. Because the Derethi priests, the Derethi religion, they wear red.
Yes. They wear red robes. The Gjorn that we see wears red armor. So I was like, you could actually get it, but you didn't because you swapped those two shards.
Yeah. Okay, can you throw me a bone for getting devotion
half.
as silver
Okay,
though?
sure.
All right.
Devotion wasn't mentioned in the overview.
Yeah.
But okay. I'm gonna say that devotion is gonna be white/silver.
Okay.
Because Elantris itself was like shining, like they say that the stones shine white, like they give off a white glow even. So silver, white, I think that's fine for devotion. Autonomy,
Red and gold.
yeah, they just said red.
Yeah,
But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
that is
It's fun. I
interesting.
think you got like 3.5 out of 7. Okay, and then I did have a note here about the spiritual realm. Just this is what the Coppermind says about it. It says the spiritual realm exists beyond space and time. As such, it is not truly a place. It's more about intent and identity, which we will learn all about when we enter Roshar for the most part.
Right.
Identity, at least. Which we will dive deeply into in the fifth Stormlight book.
So I do have one note on that, and I'm wondering, like, this is just a me thought. This isn't anything canon, but we do know that Hoyd has the ability to kind of skip through time, not necessarily go back in time, but he has the ability to like pass through intervening years quickly.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is some sort of tie into the spiritual realm where the spiritual realm, is kind of outside of time, if it's a tie to the spiritual realm that allows Hoyd to do that. Let us know what you think in the comments.
I think so. I think so because a lot of the time when we were seeing Hoyd, like when we're learning more about Hoyd and his powers, he does have an excellent grasp on his spirit web.
Right.
Um,
To the extent that he's able to fool his spirit web.
yes. So we can either give that power to the fact that he was a Dawn Shard,
Right.
or we could give that power to the fact that Wit's Wit, Hoyd's Hoyd, and he just rules don't apply to him.
One thing, just so you guys, just so we're not using a whole bunch of terminology that not everybody knows. I don't know that spirit web is anywhere, in the books. If you've just read through the Cosmere once,
it's
maybe in Mistborn Secret History.
It's in it's in Wind and Truth. I'm
okay.
Pretty sure it actually gets talked about a little bit in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. That being said, we can definitely explain spirit webs.
Yeah, just it is one of those things that it's not something that we're going to talk a whole lot about, but there's a lot, like, it's going to be a bigger thing as we move deeper into the Cosmere, I'm sure.
Yes.
But basically, your spirit web is your identity,
Yeah, so
your belief system about yourself, almost.
Yes. So we get into some very vague power system when we talk about identity and connections, and the spirit web. It has to do more with realmatic theory than anything else. But your spirit web is basically a network of connections, identity, and investiture that make up the soul, essentially.
Okay.
And that's the soul of anything. So a creature, a place, an object, a planet, a person. And yeah, so it's kind of a abstract thing to explain.
Right.
Because you're just hearing, oh, it's a jumble of all these. But that's basically what a spirit web is the layout of the soul, essentially.
Perfect.
So, yeah, that's what a spirit web is. Now, guys, that we've gone through all of that, it is time for a recurring segment that we will be doing every single week, and that is the Cosmere question of the week.
Before we jump into that, Hoyd's friend is named Design. Into the Cosmere question of the week.
The Cosmere question of the week was not, what is Hoyd's friend's name? But here we go. So this being our first episode, we found a question that we could talk about. But in the future, what we'd really love this segment to grow into is you guys asking us questions and coming to us with your theories that we can then chat about and answer.
Yes.
Pretty much. So for this week's Cosmere question of the week, I basically just went on Reddit and looked through a bunch of Cosmere questions, and this one by late underscore emu on the r/Cosmere subreddit.
Okay.
This was asked 7 months ago, so it's actually pretty recent. But forewarning, they have not read through the whole Cosmere, so it's nothing crazy complex. But they basically ask, they're asking about Wit specifically, and he's asking if he could bring Allomancy to another world, or if a Knight Radiant could bring their powers to Scadrial, for instance,
Right.
is the basis of the question.
Right. And there's a lot to dive into with that question in getting into different magic systems powering different abilities. But at this base question, the answer is yes.
Yes. And we see plenty of invested arts brought to different worlds.
Yes.
We see Vasher use breath on Roshar, for instance.
As does Azure.
Yes. So there are plenty of instances in the Cosmere where we see certain invested arts used other places. Now, the more interesting question here is something that we have talked about at length, and it's whether you can use certain types of investiture to power other types of invested arts.
Right.
So, for instance, using Stormlight to power an Aeon, or using the door to power Allomancy.
Right.
Stuff
Or,
like that.
or yeah, just whether you can come from Scadrial as a Mistborn or whatever it is, and use
Swallow some Stormlight.
swallow some Stormlight and
Use it.
push, you know?
Yeah.
And that is, we'd love to hear your guys' theories on that as well. We want to know what your guys' thoughts are, because there is an answer out there, but it's not a fully like fleshed out like this is how everything works.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
And it honestly depends on what kinds of investiture you're talking about.
Right.
Because it is actually said by Brandon that you can do this. Some of them are easier to do, and some of them are ridiculously hard to do.
Yes.
So
one thing Brandon did say is Zael, who we see in Warbreaker as Vasher, we see him in the Stormlight Archives as Zael. He's one of the 5 scholars. He has come over to Roshar, but as a return, he needs to feed on investiture to live.
Yeah.
And so on Nulthis, he'd consume a biochromatic breath a week. But on Scadrial, or not Scadrial, sorry, on Roshar, there are no biochromatic breaths. People aren't born with them. And so he doesn't have a supply of biochromatic breath. And so we know that Zael has figured out how to convert, more or less, Stormlight into breaths. So it's not necessarily that he is using Stormlight to power Awakening. What he's doing is converting Stormlight into breath to then power Awakening.
And we know he's not using Stormlight to power the Awakening, just because we know he has enough breath to reach a certain level.
Yeah, whatever heightening.
Yeah, whatever heightening it is, where he is aware. Like Kaladin says, it's like he has eyes on the back of his head.
Yes, we do see Zael be more aware of like
heightened to a certain extent.
Yeah, to where he can tell Kaladin's walking up behind him when nobody else can, because Kaladin moves stealthily, like silently.
Yeah, and I think when we see him use breath, I think he uses it on
some sheets.
Yeah. I don't think he's using Stormlight there either.
It's all breath.
Yeah, Stormlight is very easy to see. The body doesn't hold Stormlight very well.
Yeah.
So if he were to use it, I think, we would have noticed.
Yes. So it has been confirmed by Brandon that Zael is changing Stormlight into breath.
Yes.
But we also see Azure, who is Vivenna, use awakening as well. And it's been confirmed by Brandon that she doesn't know how to do that. So any awakening we've seen her do on Roshar
Yeah.
has just been from breath that she brought with her.
And I think that's just
Matter of necessity.
a matter of necessity. I also think that we can just give Vasher his flowers there.
Yeah.
Being a 5 scholar, he does seem to be at the forefront of investiture conversion.
Yeah.
And that is also why the Ghost Bloods are so interested in him.
Yeah.
So that is the Cosmere question of the week. Hopefully we explained that in a way that was easily consumed and understood. But if you guys have questions that you want me and Jax to answer and theorize on, go ahead and subscribe and leave a comment below if you're on YouTube. If you're an audio listener, go ahead and leave a review wherever you're listening to the podcast.
You can also, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. I'm just going to say we will see it, especially in these early days.
In these early days,
If you want to be special, if you want to be a day one, go ahead and leave a review with a question for us. What were you gonna say?
You guys can also find us anywhere you can consume content. So TikTok, Instagram Reels. Our handle is at Into the Coppermind everywhere. So go find us and follow and like and subscribe and
Follow, like, and subscribe and everything and
comment.
Yeah. And that's all we have for you guys today. So join us next week, or in our case, in 5 minutes when we record the next episode, as we dive into the Coppermind. That's a wrap.